The Marshal's death. The first bullet caught Deputy Marshal Frank Cassidy in the chest. He was still in the saddle when it hit, one hand gripping the reins of the packhorse behind him, the other resting easy on his thigh. The impact threw him backward. His hat tumbled into the dust of the Wickenburg Trail. Blood bloomed across his vest like a dark flower opening in the Arizona sun. Cole Brennan heard the shot a split second before he saw Frank fall. The sound rolled across the scrubland, sharp and final. His hand went to his Colt Peacemaker, but even as his fingers closed around the grip, he knew they were already too late. 3 riders burst from behind the outcropping of red rock to the east. Professionals. They moved with the precision of men who'd done this before, who'd practiced the geometry of an ambush until it became muscle memory. The leader wore a duster, the color of old blood. His face was hidden beneath the wide brim of a black Stetson, but Cole knew him anyway. You didn't forget a man like Silas Crow. The second shot screamed past Cole's ear, close enough that he felt the heat of its passage. He yanked his horse hard to the left, toward the scant cover of a cluster of mesquite. The animal stumbled, found its footing, lunged forward. Cole's wounded shoulder, 3 days healed from a bar fight in Prescott, tore open again. Fresh blood soaked through his shirt. Behind him, Frank hit the ground. The packhorse carrying their supplies, and something infinitely more valuable, reared and bolted. Its lead rope snapped free. The animal disappeared into the maze of arroyos to the south, taking with it the leather saddlebags that contained 6 months of investigation, 40 pages of carefully documented evidence, and the one thing that could bring down the most powerful men in Arizona territory. Cole fired twice from behind the mesquite. One shot went wide. The other caught Silas Crow's horse in the flank. The animal screamed and went down, throwing its rider. Crow rolled, came up shooting. His bullet punched through the mesquite trunk 6 inches from Cole's head, showering him with splinters and leaves. The other 2 riders spread out flanking. Cole recognized the tactics. Cavalry, or men who'd learned to fight alongside cavalry. They were trying to pin him, to cut off any escape route, to finish this clean and quick before any witnesses happened along the trail. Frank was still moving. Cole saw him through the branches, saw his friend dragging himself across the hardpan toward a fallen cottonwood 20 yards away. Frank's right hand clutched his chest, trying to hold back the blood. His left hand still gripped his revolver. Even dying Frank Cassidy was too stubborn to let go of his weapon. A third bullet clipped Cole's hat. He dropped flat, crawling through the mesquite on his elbows. His shoulder screamed. He ignored it. Movement to his right. He swung the Peacemaker around, squeezed the trigger. The gunman there, a lean man with a scarred face, jerked backward and fell. 2 left. But Cole's ammunition was running low, and Frank was bleeding out in the open, and the documents were gone, scattered somewhere in the desert with a terrified packhorse. Silas Crow's voice cut through the gunfire calm as a man ordering breakfast. "Brennan, you know how this ends." Cole didn't answer. He was watching Frank measuring the distance. 30 yards of open ground. No cover, suicidal. But Frank's breathing was getting shallow, ragged. There wasn't much time. "We just want the woman," Crow continued. "You give her up, we let you walk. You and Frank both. Our quarrel's not with you." Lies, of course. Men like Crow didn't leave witnesses. But the lie told Cole something important. They didn't know where Nashota was. They thought she was here on this trail, maybe hiding in the rocks. They didn't know Cole had left her back in Prescott, hidden in the back room of Maria Delgado's saloon. Small mercies. Cole rolled left, came up firing. 3 shots fast. The second gunman dove for cover. In that moment of chaos, Cole broke from the mesquite and ran. He covered 15 yards before the bullets started chasing him. They kicked up dust at his heels, whined past his head. His boots pounded the earth. His lungs burned. The cottonwood where Frank lay seemed impossibly far away, a lifetime away. 10 yards. 5. A bullet caught him in the back of his left thigh. His leg went numb. He stumbled, fell, slid the last few feet on his belly, and crashed into the cottonwood trunk beside Frank. His friend's face was gray. Blood bubbled at the corners of his mouth, but his eyes were clear-focused. Even now, even dying, Frank Cassidy's mind was working. "Cole," Frank whispered. His voice was wet failing. "Prescott, mining company. They know." Cole pressed his hand over the wound in Frank's chest. Useless. The bullet had punched clean through, probably clipped the lung, maybe nicked the heart. A man didn't survive a wound like that out here 30 miles from the nearest doctor. "Save your strength," Cole said, knowing it was pointless. "Documents." Frank's hand found Cole's wrist gripped with surprising strength. "I sent copies. Telegraph office. Tucson. If something happened." "You're not dying, Frank." Frank's laugh was a terrible, gurgling sound. "Liar. Always were a terrible liar." His eyes found Cole's, held them. "Finish it. Promise me. Finish what we started. I promise." "The woman. Nashota. She's the key. 7 witnesses. Maria knows where. Get them to Tucson. Federal court. Don't trust local." Cole nodded. Bullets were still hammering the cottonwood, chewing away the bark, filling the air with splinters. Somewhere to the east, he could hear Silas Crow shouting orders. They were moving in for the kill. Frank's grip tightened. One more thing, the second name on the list. J. Smith. "It's not Smith, it's—" His eyes went wide. His mouth opened. But whatever name he'd been about to say died in his throat. The light faded from his eyes like a candle going out in a windstorm. His hand went slack in Cole's grip. Deputy Marshal Frank Cassidy, 20 years in law enforcement, veteran of a dozen range wars and Indian campaigns, died in the dirt of the Wickenburg Trail at 3:30 in the afternoon on October 17, 1877. Cole closed his friend's eyes. The shooting had stopped. An eerie quiet settled over the desert. Cole could hear his own breathing harsh and ragged, could hear the wind moving through the scrub, could hear in the distance the fading hoofbeats of the pack-horse still running south. Silas Crow's voice drifted across the killing ground. "Brennan, last chance. Come out hands up and maybe you live through this." Cole checked his peacemaker. 3 rounds left. Not enough. His leg was on fire now, the numbness replaced by white, hot agony. He couldn't run, couldn't fight, could barely move, but he could think. The arroyos to the south. If he could reach them, lose himself in that maze of washes and gullies, he might make it. Might survive long enough to get back to Prescott to warn Nashota to finish what Frank had started. He took Frank's gun belt, his ammunition, his badge, left everything else. A man's life reduced to metal and leather and unfulfilled promises. Then Cole Brennan did something he hadn't done since the war. He ran. The bullet in his leg made each step a fresh agony, but he pushed through it, drove himself forward through sheer force of will. Behind him he heard shouting, heard gunfire, heard the pounding of hooves, but the arroyos were close now, just 50 yards, 40-30. He fell into the first wash and rolled tumbling down the sandy slope in a tangle of limbs and dust and pain, landed hard at the bottom, lay there for a moment listening. Hoofbeats above, voices, Crow's men searching. Lost him in the arroyos, could be anywhere. Boss wants him dead. Boss wants the woman more. Brennan's wounded bad. He won't make it far, we can track him later. What about the body? Leave it. Coyotes will clean it up. The voices faded. The hoofbeats moved away, heading north, back toward Prescott. Cole waited until he couldn't hear them anymore. Then he waited longer, until the sun started its long slide toward the western horizon and the shadows grew long across the desert floor. Only then did he move. His leg was a mess. The bullet had gone through clean, but the wound was already starting to stiffen. He tore strips from his shirt, bound it tight. Not good, but good enough to walk. He'd had worse. The walk back to Prescott took him all night. He moved through the darkness like a ghost, following dry washes and game trails, avoiding the main road. Every step was agony. Every breath felt like it might be his last. But he kept moving, kept putting one foot in front of the other, because Frank was dead, and Nashota was in danger. And somewhere out there in the night, powerful men were planning to bury the truth along with anyone who knew it. Dawn found him on the ridge overlooking Prescott. The town spread out below him, a collection of wooden structures clinging to the high desert like a stain. Smoke rose from 100 chimneys. The morning stage was just pulling into the depot, life continuing ordinary and oblivious, while 30 miles away, a good man lay dead in the dust. Cole could see Maria's saloon from here, the false front freshly painted, the hitching rail already occupied by a few early risers who couldn't wait for sundown to start drinking. Nashota was in there somewhere, hidden in the back room, waiting for him and Frank to return. He'd have to tell her Frank was dead. Would have to explain that the documents were lost, that the men who'd killed her family knew she was alive and were hunting her. Would have to convince her to trust him, to let him get her to Tucson to federal protection. Would have to find a way to finish what Frank had started, even though he was one man against what looked like half the territorial government. Cole Brennan took a breath, felt the desert air fill his lungs, tasted dust and blood and the copper tang of his own mortality. Then he started down the ridge toward Prescott, toward Maria's saloon, toward the woman who held the key to the biggest conspiracy Arizona Territory had ever seen. He had promises to keep. And 72 hours ago he'd made the mistake of giving Frank Cassidy his word. 72 hours earlier, the ranch sat in a valley between two ridges 20 miles north of Prescott, where Granite Creek cut through the red earth like a scar. Cole Brennan had bought the land 3 years ago with his savings from 15 years as a U.S. Marshal, back when he still believed a man could leave the violence behind and make a quiet life with cattle and horses and the kind of peace that came from hard work and solitude. He was learning slowly that some things followed you no matter how far you ran. The October morning was cool, touched with the first hint of the winter that would come sweeping down from the high country in another month. Cole was mending fence along the northern pasture when he saw the rider coming up the trail from town. He knew who it was before the man got close enough to make out his face. You didn't forget the way Frank Cassidy sat, a horse straight-backed and easy, like he'd been born in the saddle, like the saddle was the one place in the world where he truly belonged. Cole set down his hammer and wire cutters, walked to meet his old friend at the fence line. Frank reined in his bay gelding, looked down at Cole with eyes the color of winter sky. Neither man spoke for a long moment. There was history between them, the kind that didn't need words. They'd ridden together for 7 years back when Cole wore a badge and believed in the law, had saved each other's lives more times than either could count, had seen things that would have broken lesser men. Finally, Frank swung down from the saddle, tied the gelding to the fence post, stood there in the morning sun, dust on his boots and the weight of trouble on his shoulders. "Nice place you got here," Frank said. "It'll do." "Peaceful?" "That's the idea." Frank nodded, looking out across the valley at the cattle grazing in the distance, at the mountains, standing purple and eternal against the sky. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, almost apologetic. "I need your help, old friend. One last job." Cole felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd known this moment would come eventually, had known that men like him didn't get to retire, didn't get to walk away clean. The violence always found you. The past always came calling. "I'm out, Frank, you know that." "I know." Frank met his eyes. "But this is bigger than you or me. This is about stopping something before it happens again. There's other marshals, good men, better men. Not for this. This needs someone who can't be bought, someone who knows how deep corruption can run, someone who—" Frank paused, choosing his words carefully. "Someone who knows what we did at Canyon de Chelly." The name hit Cole like a fist. Canyon de Chelly. 5 years ago. The worst thing he'd ever witnessed and failed to stop. The thing that had made him turn in his badge and run as far from the law as his conscience would allow. "That was investigated," Cole said, but his voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Army cleared everyone, said it was a legitimate military action." The Army lied. Frank's jaw tightened, and I can prove it. He told Cole the story, then standing there in the morning sun with the smell of sage and distant water on the wind. Told him about Nashota, the Apache woman who'd survived the massacre at Canyon de Chelly. About how she'd been kept prisoner for 5 years, first at Fort Apache, then sold from one authority to another like property. About how she was being auctioned in Prescott's Market Square in 3 days, sold to the highest bidder to offset territorial costs. "She's a witness," Frank said, "the only one left alive who can testify about what really happened that day. Testify to who Army's not going to reopen the case." Not the Army, federal court. Because Canyon de Chelly wasn't a military operation. It was a hired killing. Frank pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket, handed it to Cole. The document was a contract 3 pages dense with legal language. But the substance was clear enough. Territorial Mining and Smelting Company, Incorporated, 1871, had paid $50,000 to a group of mercenaries to, in the contract's own words, clear hostile elements from disputed copper-bearing territories by any means necessary. The massacre at Canyon de Chelly had happened 6 months after the contract was signed. The mercenaries wore Army uniforms, Frank said, used Army weapons, made it look official. But they weren't Army. They were hired killers led by a man named Silas Crow, and the company that paid them is owned by some of the most powerful men in Arizona Territory. Cole read the contract twice, felt his hands starting to shake. "Where did you get this Nashota?" She saw documents in the commander's tent that day, remembered seeing a logo, T.M.&S. Company. "Took me 4 months to track down the company records, another 2 to find someone willing to testify that this contract exists. I've got copies in 3 different locations. Telegraph office in Tucson has the key evidence. If anything happens to me, it goes straight to the federal prosecutor." "You think they know you're investigating? I think there's a reason Nashota's being sold in 3 days instead of being kept in federal custody where she belongs. Someone wants her disappeared before she can talk. Someone with enough power to arrange an auction and make it look legal." "Then get her out of there before the auction. You're a deputy marshal. You've got authority." Frank shook his head. "Already tried. Request was denied. Territorial judge says she's property of the territory, not federal jurisdiction. Says the auction is legal restitution for costs incurred during Indian pacification campaigns." He spat the words like they tasted of poison. "I can't just take her. Not without starting a jurisdictional fight that would take months to resolve. Months she doesn't have." "So what's your plan?" "Buy her. Get her to Tucson. Put her in front of a federal prosecutor and let her tell her story. With her testimony and the documents I've collected, we can bring charges. Conspiracy, murder, corruption, maybe even go after the territorial governor himself." Cole looked at his friend. Saw the determination there, the anger, the guilt. Frank had been at Canyon de Chelly, too. Had seen the same things Cole had seen. Had carried the same weight for 5 years. "Why me?" Cole asked. "You could do this alone?" "Because Silas Crow is in Prescott. Because he knows I've been investigating. Because if I try to escort her alone, we'll never make it 10 miles. I need someone I can trust. Someone who can handle themselves if it goes bad." Frank's voice dropped. "And because you owe me Cole. For that day in Tombstone. For the bullet that should have killed me but hit you instead. For 3 years of letting you hide out here while I kept doing the work." It was true. All of it. Frank had taken a bullet meant for Cole during a bank robbery in Tombstone back in '74, had nearly died. Would have died if Cole hadn't gotten him to a doctor in time. The wound had ended Frank's career as a full marshal, relegated him to deputy status, stuck him with a desk job and a permanent limp. And Cole had walked away, had quit, had bought this ranch and told himself he'd earned his peace. "If I do this," Cole said slowly, "and we get her to Tucson alive, and she testifies, and somehow we don't all end up dead in a ditch somewhere, what happens to her after? She gets federal protection, new identity if she wants it, compensation, her choice." "And us," Frank smiled, but there was no humor in it. "We probably get to keep breathing. which is more than we deserve after Canyon de Chelly. The sun had climbed higher now. The day was warming. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out hunting. Cole thought about his cattle, his fence that needed mending, his quiet life. Thought about Nashota, a woman he'd never met, who'd survived horrors he could barely imagine. Thought about Frank standing here asking for help because there was no one else to ask. Thought about Canyon de Chelly, and the screaming, and the smoke, and the things he'd seen that day that still woke him up at night. "When do we leave?" Cole asked. Frank's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. "Day after tomorrow. Gives us time to prepare. Auctions at noon, day 3. We buy her, get her out of town before anyone realizes what's happening. Fast horses. Ride through the night. We can be in Tucson in 4 days if we push hard. And if Crow tries to stop us, then we stop him first." They shook hands on it the way they'd shaken hands 100 times before sealing agreements and promises and the unspoken understanding that they'd watch each other's backs no matter what came. Frank mounted his bay gelding, sat there for a moment looking down at Cole. "Thank you," he said quietly. Cole shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. We're not even close to done." "No," Frank agreed. "But we're going to be. One way or another, Cole, we're going to finish this thing. We're going to make it right." He turned his horse and rode back down the trail toward Prescott, raising dust that hung in the still air like a question mark. Cole watched him go. Somewhere deep in his gut, in that place where instinct lived, he knew this wasn't going to go the way Frank thought it would. Knew that men who could arrange massacres and buy territorial judges weren't going to let 2 former marshals upset their plans without a fight. Knew that before this was over, blood would be spilled and promises would be tested, and the question of whether any man could truly leave his past behind would be answered once and for all. He looked at the fence he'd been mending, at the wire and posts, and the simple, honest work of keeping things contained and separate and safe. Then he walked back to the ranch house to clean his guns and prepare for the kind of work that couldn't be contained, that refused to stay separate, that had never been safe and never would be. 2 days later, they would ride together into Prescott. 3 days later, Frank would be dead on the Wickenburg Trail. And Cole Brennan would learn that some promises once made could only be kept at the cost of everything a man had left to lose. The auction and aftermath. Cole Brennan reached Maria Delgado's saloon just as the sun cleared the eastern ridge. His leg had gone from white-hot agony to a dull, throbbing numbness that worried him more than the pain had. Blood soaked through the makeshift bandage, leaving a trail of dark spots in the dust behind him. He'd lost too much, knew it, didn't care. Frank was dead, and the only witness who could bring down the men responsible was somewhere inside that building, and Cole had made a promise. The saloon sat on the corner of Montezuma and Cortez Streets, a 2-story structure with a false front painted the color of dried blood. At this hour the place should have been empty, except for Maria herself, sweeping up last night's broken glass and counting the previous day's take. But when Cole pushed through the batwing doors, he found 3 men at the bar. They turned to look at him, saw the blood, saw the way he favored his left leg, saw something in his eyes that made them suddenly remember they had places to be. The saloon emptied in 30 seconds. Maria appeared from the back room, a handsome woman in her middle 30s, with iron-gray streaks in her black hair and eyes that had seen too much of the world to be surprised by anything. She took one look at Cole and locked the front door behind the departing customers. "Upstairs," she said. "Second door on the right. I'll get my kit." Cole made it halfway up the stairs before his leg gave out. He caught the railing, held on, forced himself to take the next step, and the next. By the time he reached the second-floor landing, he was shaking, and the edges of his vision had gone gray. The second door on the right opened before he could knock. Nashota stood in the doorway. Cole had seen her before 5 years ago when he'd been part of the federal investigation into Canyon de Chelly. He'd interviewed survivors, taken statements, filed reports, that had been buried so deep they might as well have been thrown into the Grand Canyon. But that woman, broken and traumatized and barely alive, bore little resemblance to the person standing before him now. She was tall, nearly 6 feet, with shoulders that spoke of hard labor and a life lived without softness. Her face was all angles and planes, beautiful in the way a cliff face is beautiful, shaped by wind and time and suffering. Her eyes were black as obsidian and just as sharp. She looked at Cole's leg, at the blood, at his face. "Where's Frank?" she asked. The question hit Cole harder than any bullet. He opened his mouth, closed it, found he didn't have the words. Nashoda's expression didn't change, but something in those dark eyes went very still. "Come inside," she said, "before you fall down." The room was small, Spartanly furnished, a narrow bed, a washstand, a single chair by the window where Nashoda had been watching the street. Maria had given her sanctuary here for 3 days, ever since the auction, keeping her hidden while Frank made arrangements for the ride to Tucson. Arrangements that would never happen now. Cole made it to the chair and collapsed into it. His leg was bleeding again, fresh blood soaking through the bandage. He needed a doctor, needed rest, needed things he wasn't going to get. Maria came in with her medical kit and a basin of water. She didn't ask questions, just knelt beside the chair and started cutting away his pants leg, exposing the wound. Her hands were steady, efficient. She'd done this before. Nashoda stood by the window watching, waiting. "Wickenburg Trail," Cole said finally. His voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. 30 miles out, ambush, 3 men, Silas Crow leading them. Frank, Nashoda's voice was carefully neutral, didn't make it. The silence that followed was profound. Maria's hands kept working, cleaning the wound, but her movements had slowed. In the street below, a wagon rattled past. Someone called out a greeting to someone else. Normal sounds. A normal morning in Prescott. Except nothing about this morning was normal, and nothing would be normal again. "The documents?" Nashoda asked. "Gone. Packhorse bolted. Could be anywhere between here and Wickenburg, so we have nothing. Frank sent copies to Tucson, telegraph office, but without you to testify, they're just paper." Nashoda turned from the window, met his eyes. "And you think I'll still testify? Now that your friend is dead and you're half dead yourself, and the men who want me gone know exactly where we are, I think you've been running for 5 years, Cole said. "I think you're tired of running. I think you want the same thing Frank wanted. Justice." "Justice," she said the word like it was foreign, something from a language she'd forgotten. "There's no justice for my people, Marshal. There's only survival." "I'm not a marshal anymore." "But you were, 5 years ago. You came to Canyon de Chelly after, asked your questions, wrote your reports, then you left and nothing changed." It was true. All of it. Cole had investigated, had found evidence of irregularities, had submitted a report recommending further inquiry, and the Army had buried it, and the territorial government had looked the other way, and Cole had told himself there was nothing more he could do, had told himself that right up until the day he turned in his badge and bought a ranch and tried to forget. "This time will be different," he said. "Why?" "Because you promise." Nashoda's laugh was bitter. "White men's promises killed my family." Maria finished bandaging Cole's leg, stood up, wiping blood from her hands. "He's right about one thing. You can't stay here. Silas Crow knows Frank was investigating. If Frank's dead, Crow will come looking for loose ends, and you're the loosest end there is. Let him come. He won't come alone, and this building won't stand up to a determined assault. You know that." Nashoda turned back to the window, stood there for a long moment, looking out at Prescott, at the town that had sold her like property 3 days ago, at the territory that had taken everything from her and given nothing back. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, thoughtful. "Tell me about the auction." 3 days earlier, the Prescott Market Square was a rectangle of trampled earth bordered by wooden buildings on 3 sides and open desert on the 4th. On auction days it filled with people, miners spending their wages, cowboys fresh off the trail, merchants hawking goods, farmers selling produce, and always at the center, the auction block. Cole and Frank had arrived early, taking positions at opposite corners of the square. The plan was simple. Frank would bid. Cole would watch for trouble. If anyone tried to interfere, if Silas Crow or his men made a move, Cole would be ready. The morning auctions went quickly. A wagon load of mining equipment, 2 horses, a collection of furniture from an estate sale. The auctioneer, a fat man named Jesse Drummond, who smelled of whiskey and old sweat, kept up a steady patter, cajoling bids out of the crowd. Then they brought out Nashota. The crowd's murmur changed, became something uglier. Men pressed forward, craning their necks to see. She was chained at the wrists and ankles, the metal links short enough that she could barely walk. 2 territorial deputies flanked her hands on their guns like they expected her to attack at any moment. She didn't look afraid, didn't look angry. Looked like she'd gone somewhere far away in her mind to a place where none of this could touch her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Drummond bellowed, his voice carrying across the square. "Next item, 1 Apache female, approximately 30 years of age, survivor of the Canyon de Chelly pacification campaign. Territorial judge has declared her property of the territory to be sold at auction to offset costs of said campaign. Strong, healthy. Suitable for domestic labor or other purposes as the buyer sees fit." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Ugly, knowing laughter. Cole's hand moved to his Colt. Frank caught his eye across the square, shook his head slightly. Not yet. "Bidding starts at $5, Drummond announced. 2, someone shouted. More laughter. 3, called another voice. "I got 4 here in the back." Drummond was enjoying himself, playing the crowd like a fiddle. "Come now, gentlemen. Look at the size of her. That's a lot of woman. Strong as any man. Worth at least $6, I'd say." $10? Cole called out, his voice cutting through the noise. The crowd turned to look at him. Frank stood there calmly, one hand resting easy on his belt, the other holding his hat. Just another bidder. Nothing special. Except Cole saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes never stopped moving, cataloging threats. $6, Jesse Drummond said. "Do I hear 7? Silence. The crowd shifted, uncertain. $6 was good money, more than most of these men made in a week. Cole scanned the faces, found the one he was looking for. Silas Crow standing at the back of the crowd, half hidden in the shadow of the general store's awning. He wasn't bidding, wasn't moving, just watching, with those cold, calculating eyes, watching Frank. "6 going once," Drummond called. Crow's lips moved, said something to the man beside him. The man nodded and slipped away into the crowd. "6 going twice." Cole started moving, casual, just another bystander shifting position, but his hand never left his gun. Sold. Drummond's gavel came down. "To the gentleman in the gray vest for $6. Cole stepped forward, his wounded leg nearly buckling, counted out the coins into Drummond's sweaty palm. The deputies unlocked Nashota's chains. She stood there rubbing her wrists, watching Frank with those unreadable, dark eyes. Cole cut through her chains with his knife. "Come on, we're leaving." Frank appeared at his side. "Ma'am, I'm Deputy Marshal Frank Cassidy. You're under federal protection now." "Federal protection," she said. Her voice was rough from disuse. "Is that what they called it at Canyon de Chelly?" Frank's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. "I wasn't at Canyon de Chelly, but I know what happened there, and I'm going to make sure the men responsible answer for it. With what words? White man's justice, with the truth, and with your testimony." She studied him for a long moment. Then her eyes shifted past him, found Cole in the crowd. "And him? Was he at Canyon de Chelly?" "No, he investigated after. He's here to help get you to Tucson alive." "Tucson!" She said it like the name of a place that might as well be on the moon. And if I refuse to go, then you're free to do as you please. But Silas Crow is here. And the men who paid him to kill your family know you're alive. How long do you think you'll last on your own?" It was a harsh truth delivered without softness. But Frank had never been good at softness. He dealt in hard facts and harder choices. Nashota looked at Crow, then back at Frank. "I'll go," she said. "But not for your justice, for mine." They were halfway across the square when Silas Crow stepped into their path. Up close he was a man of average height and lean build, dressed in range clothes that had seen hard use. His face was weathered-scarred, the kind of face that could have belonged to any of 1,000 cowboys or drifters or hired guns drifting through the territories, except for the eyes. They were the palest blue Cole had ever seen, cold as winter ice. "Deputy Marshal Cassidy," Crow said pleasantly, "that's an expensive purchase you made. Hope she's worth $6. "She's a federal witness, Crow. That makes her worth considerably more." "A witness? To what exactly?" "You know to what." Crow's smile never touched those cold eyes. "I know a lot of things, Marshal. Know you've been asking questions, poking into matters that don't concern you. Know you've been talking to people about events that happened 5 years ago, events that were properly investigated and closed by the Army. The Army's investigation was a whitewash, and you know it." "Careful, Marshal. Accusations like that could damage a man's reputation." Frank stepped closer. Close enough that Cole could see his hand hovering near his gun. "Here's an accusation for you, Crow. You murdered 42 Apache men, women, and children at Canyon de Chelly on June 12, 1872. You did it for money, for Territorial Mining and Smelting Company, and I'm going to prove it." For just a moment something flickered in Crow's eyes. Not fear, not anger, something else. Calculation. "That's a serious charge," he said quietly. "Got any proof?" "I will have. Soon. Then I look forward to defending myself in court." Crow tipped his hat to Nashota. "Ma'am, pleasure seeing you again. You're looking well. Prison must have agreed with you." He walked away, unhurried, calm, as a man without a care in the world. But Cole saw his hand signal to 2 men in the crowd, saw them nod and disappear into the maze of side streets, saw in that moment exactly how this was going to end. Present, Cole finished the story. His voice had gone hoarse halfway through, and Maria had brought him water, which he drank gratefully. The bullet wound in his leg throbbed in time with his heartbeat. Outside, Prescott was coming fully awake. Voices in the street, the rattle of wagons, the normal sounds of a town going about its business. Nashota hadn't moved from the window. "Frank knew," she said finally. "He knew Crow would try to stop us. He knew. That's why he arranged for the documents to go to Tucson separately. That's why he told me about the copies. He was prepared for this, but not prepared enough. No one's ever prepared enough for men like Crow." She turned from the window. "So what now? We run hide wait for them to find us." Cole tried to stand, made it halfway before his leg buckled and Maria pushed him back down. "Now," he said through gritted teeth, "we do what Frank would have wanted. We get you to Tucson. We make sure his death meant something. On that leg you can barely walk. I'll manage. You'll die, and I'll die with you." "Then what do you suggest?" Nashota was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice held a note Cole hadn't heard before. Not hope exactly, but something close. Determination, maybe. "Frank said there were other witnesses. 7 of them. People Maria knows how to find." Maria nodded. "Apache who survived other attacks, scattered, hiding, but alive, and willing to talk if they knew it would make a difference." "So we find them," Nashota said. "We gather them. We take them all to Tucson together. 1 witness Crow can silence 8. She shook her head. "That's harder." Cole looked at Maria. "Can you do it? Find them, bring them here. Give me 3 days." "We don't have 3 days. Crow knows Frank's dead by now." "He'll be coming." "Then we don't wait here." Nashota's eyes were bright now, alive with purpose. "We go to them, gather them as we travel, take the long route to Tucson. stay ahead of Crow. It was a good plan, better than anything Cole could have come up with in his current state, but it had one fatal flaw. "I can't ride," he said. "Not like this. I'd slow you down. Then you stay here. Heal. We'll do this without you. Frank asked me to protect you, and you have. You brought me news of his death. You offered to help, but I don't need protection, Marshal. I need justice. And if that means doing this alone, so be it." She meant it. Cole could see it in her eyes. She would walk out that door right now, wounded leg or not, and start gathering witnesses. Would do Frank's work, would finish what had been started, and she would probably die before she made it 10 miles. He was about to say so when the window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the room. Something heavy thudded against the far wall. For a moment, Cole's mind refused to process what he was seeing. Then, he smelled the kerosene and saw the flames and understood. Firebomb. Simple. Effective. The kind of thing men like Crow used when they wanted to flush prey from cover. "Out!" Maria was already moving, grabbing Cole's arm, hauling him toward the door. "Backstairs. Now." They made it into the hallway as smoke began to fill the room behind them. Cole could hear shouting from the street below, could hear the crackle of flames spreading fast through the dry wood of the saloon's upper floor. Nashota was ahead of them, moving with the grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime running from danger. She hit the back stairs at a sprint, taking them 3 at a time. Cole tried to follow. His leg gave out on the second step. He fell, tumbled, crashed into Maria, and they both went down in a tangle of limbs. Above them, the fire roared. Below in the alley behind the saloon, Cole heard the unmistakable sound of guns being cocked. They were trapped. And somewhere in the smoke and chaos, Silas Crow was coming to finish what he'd started on the Wickenburg Trail. The investigation. Nashota heard the guns cocking in the alley below and made a decision that would save all their lives. Instead of retreating back up the burning stairs, she launched herself through the window at the landing's end. Glass exploded outward. She fell 10 feet, landed hard on the roof of the adjacent building, rolled, came up running. Behind her, flames licked from Maria's saloon like hungry tongues tasting the morning air. In the alley, 3 men stood with rifles trained on the back door, waiting for their targets to emerge. They never looked up, never saw Nashota dropping down behind them from the overhang, knife in hand, moving with the terrible silence of a predator. The first man went down without a sound, her blade opening his throat before he could cry out. The second turned at the soft thud of his companion's body hitting dirt. Nashota's knife found his chest. He fell backward, rifle clattering from nerveless fingers. The third man got his rifle up, got his finger on the trigger, almost got the shot off before Nashota was on him, one hand clamping over his mouth, the other driving her blade up under his ribs, finding his heart with the precision of someone who'd learned anatomy through necessity. He died quietly, eyes wide with surprise. The whole thing took less than 15 seconds. Cole saw it happen from the landing window, saw Nashota wipe her blade clean on the dead man's shirt, saw her wave up at them. All clear. He made it down the stairs with Maria's help, each step a fresh agony. The smoke was thick now, acrid, burning his lungs. Behind them, the upper floor was fully engulfed. In minutes, the whole building would be ash. They emerged into the alley to find Nashota already going through the dead men's pockets, methodical and efficient. She found ammunition, a flask of whiskey, $14 in mixed coin, and a folded piece of paper with writing on it. She handed the paper to Cole. It was a list of names. His was at the top. Frank's name had a line drawn through it. Maria's was third, and at the bottom, in different handwriting, a note, "Blackwell wants them all dead by sundown. No witnesses. S.C., Silas Crow's initials." And a name Cole had heard before, but never connected to any of this. Blackwell. Harrison Blackwell, the Deputy Governor of Arizona Territory, the man who publicly championed law and order, while privately apparently ordering assassinations. "We need to move," Maria said. She was looking at the growing crowd on Montezuma Street where people had gathered to watch the saloon burn. Someone will have heard the commotion. Sheriff will come. And right now, I'm not sure whose side he's on. They took the dead men's horses. 3 animals, reasonably fresh with saddles that had seen hard use. Cole needed help mounting his wounded leg, refusing to bear weight. Once in the saddle, though, he found he could manage. Pain he could work with. It was unconsciousness he had to avoid. They rode north away from the burning saloon, away from Prescott's main streets. Took the back trails that wound through the foothills paths used by smugglers and men who had reasons to avoid attention. By the time the sun reached its zenith, they were 5 miles from town, hidden in a stand of cottonwoods beside Granite Creek. Cole's vision kept trying to gray out at the edges. He'd lost too much blood, was running on nothing but will and stubbornness and the ghost of a promise made to a dead man. Maria made him drink from her canteen, then poured half a flask of the dead man's whiskey over his leg wound. The alcohol burned like liquid fire, but it cleaned the gash and bought him a few more hours before infection set in. While Maria worked, Nashota kept watch. She'd found a Winchester among the dead men's gear, and she held it with the easy familiarity of someone who knew her way around firearms. Every few minutes she'd scan the horizon, checking their back trail. "No pursuit yet," she said, "but they'll come." "How many men does Crow have?" Cole asked through gritted teeth. "At the auction I counted 7, but he could have more. Men like him always have more." Maria tied off the new bandage. "There's someone in town who might help. Thomas Walker, goes by Flint. He was cavalry back during the Apache campaigns. Mustered out in '73 after Gettysburg caught up with him. Lost part of his leg to gangrene. Why would he help us? Because Frank talked to him. 2 days before the auction, I saw them together at Flint's smithy. They were old friends, I think. Frank trusted him." It wasn't much to go on, but it was more than they had otherwise. They waited until dusk before riding back toward Prescott. Came in from the east this time, avoiding the main roads. The town was quieter now. The excitement of the fire faded into evening routine. Lamps were being lit in windows. The smell of cooking fires drifted on the air. Flint Walker's smithy sat at the edge of town, a stone building with a wide door and a chimney that rose like a pointing finger against the darkening sky. They could see the glow of his forge through the windows, hear the ring of hammer on anvil. Cole dismounted with difficulty, leaned against his horse for a moment until the world stopped spinning. Then he limped toward the smithy entrance, one hand on his Colt, ready for anything. The man working the forge looked up as they entered. He was in his middle 40s, broad-shouldered and thick-armed with gray threading through his dark hair and the kind of face that had seen hard weather and harder times. His left leg ended just below the knee. A wooden prosthetic extended from there, worn smooth by years of use. "We're closed," he said, not unkindly. Then he saw Cole's face, and something in his expression changed. Recognition, and something else. Grief, maybe? "You're Brennan," he said. It wasn't a question. "Frank sent you to me, didn't he?" "Before the auction." Flint set down his hammer, wiped his hands on his leather apron. 3 days ago. Said if anything happened to him, I should give you something." He crossed to a workbench in the corner, moved aside tools and scrap metal, pulled out a small tin box. "He was a good man, Frank Cassidy. One of the few. He's dead." "I know. Word travels fast in a town like this." Flint handed Cole the box. "I'm sorry, for what it's worth." Inside the box was a key, brass small with a number stamped on the head. 37. "Safety deposit box," Flint said. "Bank of Prescott. Frank set it up 2 weeks ago, paid for a year in advance. Said it was insurance." Cole pocketed the key. "The bank will be closed now, won't open until morning. Then you've got until morning to figure out how to get in there without half the town seeing you. Because by now every man on Crow's payroll knows you're still alive, and they'll be watching." Nashota stepped forward. "You knew Frank. Did you trust him?" Flint met her eyes without flinching. "I did." "Then help us. We need to get into that bank tonight. We need whatever Frank left there. and we need to stay alive long enough to use it. What's in it for me? The chance to make right what we did wrong, Cole said quietly. 5 years ago, Canyon de Chelly. Something flickered across Flint's face. Old pain, old shame. I was the scout, he said. His voice had gone rough. I led them there, Crow and his men. Thought it was a legitimate operation. Army orders, removal of hostiles. That's what they told me. He looked at Nashota. I didn't know they were going to kill everyone. Didn't know until the shooting started. By then, it was too late. It's always too late, Nashota said, until it isn't. Flint was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Bank's got a back entrance. Delivery door. Lock's not much. I can get you in, but you'll have to be quick. And quiet. They waited until midnight. The town had gone dark and silent, only a few saloons still showing light. The Bank of Prescott was a 2-story brick building on the corner of Granite and Goodwin, built solid to withstand fire and robbery. The front entrance had iron bars. The vault was supposed to be impenetrable, but the back door, the one used for deliveries and maintenance, had a simple lock that Flint picked in less than a minute. Inside, the bank smelled of paper and ink and old money. Flint led them through the back offices to the vault room. The safety deposit boxes lined one wall, brass doors gleaming in the moonlight that filtered through the high windows. Number 37 was in the middle row. Cole's hands shook as he fitted the key into the lock. Turned it, heard the mechanism click. The box contained a leather folder thick with papers. Cole carried it to a desk by the window where he could read by moonlight. Opened it. Started going through the contents while Nashota and Flint kept watch. There were maps. Geological surveys showing copper deposits on land that had belonged to the Apache. Assay reports valuing the deposits in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And contracts, dozens of them. But it was the list of names that made Cole's blood run cold. 5 names. 5 men who sat on the board of Territorial Mining and Smelting Company. Governor William Bradford, Judge Edmund Morris, Sheriff Henry Cole, and 2 marked only as J. Smith. Frank had written notes in the margins. Next to Judge Morris, honest, approached him, refused bribe, threatened. Next to Sheriff Cole, bought, useless. And next to the first J. Smith, a single word in Frank's careful handwriting, Sutherland. John Sutherland, president of TM&S Company. The man who'd signed the contracts, who'd paid $50,000 to Silas Crow to clear Apache land. But it was the second J. Smith that made Cole stop. Frank had written a question mark next to it. Then, in what looked like more recent ink, Blackwell, Harrison Blackwell. Deputy Governor, the man who publicly investigated corruption while privately ordering assassinations. We need to find out for certain, Cole said. Need proof that Blackwell is J. Smith, number 2. Maria had been quiet, reading over his shoulder. Now she spoke. There's a way. Blackwell meets with Silas every Thursday night. Back room of my saloon. She paused. Or what used to be my saloon. But he won't go there now. He'll find somewhere else. Where? I know his patterns. He likes the silver dollar on Whiskey Row, thinks he's being discreet, but half the working girls in town know his face. If he's meeting Silas, it'll be there. Today's Thursday, Nashota said. They got to the silver dollar just after 8. Took positions in the alley across the street in the shadows where they could watch the entrance without being seen. Cole's leg throbbed. His head felt light. He needed food, water, rest. Needed things he couldn't have. An hour passed, then another. Cole was starting to think they'd missed him when a man in an expensive suit emerged from a carriage on the corner. He kept his hat pulled low, his collar turned up. But Maria recognized him. That's Blackwell. They watched him enter the saloon, watched through the window as he made his way to the back. 20 minutes later, another man arrived, Silas Crow. He went straight to the back room. Stayed for 30 minutes. When he emerged, Cole saw something pass between Crow and Blackwell. A handshake. An envelope changing hands. Payment for services rendered. Payment for Frank's murder. Cole's hand tightened on his Colt. Every instinct screamed at him to walk across that street and put a bullet in both men. To end this here and now, consequences be damned. Nashota's hand on his arm stopped him. "Not yet," she whispered. "We need them alive. Need them to testify. Need the whole conspiracy exposed." She was right. Cole knew she was right. But watching Silas Crow walk away, knowing Frank's blood was still fresh on his hands, took every ounce of restraint Cole possessed. Flint followed Crow. Came back 10 minutes later with news. "He's got men, 7 of them, holed up at the old Jennings Ranch 5 miles west of your place, Brennan. They're planning something. I heard 2 of them talking. Something about 50 more men coming in from New Mexico. Reinforcements. 50 men. The number hit Cole like a physical blow. They were 3 people, 1 wounded up against an army. "We can't win a straight fight," Maria said. "Not against those numbers." "Then we don't fight straight," Nashota said. She was looking at Cole with those dark, intense eyes. "We do what my people have always done. We use the land. We choose our ground, and we make them come to us." Cole thought about his ranch, about the valley and the ridges, about Granite Creek cutting through the property, about the places a man could ford up and make a stand, about the promises he'd made to a dead friend. "My ranch," he said. "We go there, tonight, fortify, and when they come for us, we'll be ready." They rode out within the hour, took the long way around staying off the main trails, reached Cole's ranch just before dawn. The place looked smaller than Cole remembered, more vulnerable, but it had good bones, stone foundation, thick walls, a clear view of the approach from 3 directions. They spent the morning preparing. Flint helped Cole move ammunition and weapons to strategic positions. Nashota scouted the perimeter, marking good shooting positions. Maria cooked what food they had, knowing they might be under siege soon. The attack came at sunset. 7 riders, Silas Crow in the lead. They came up the main trail bold as brass, not trying to hide. Why would they? 7 armed men against 3, 1 wounded. The math was simple, except they didn't know about Flint. And they didn't know Cole Brennan had spent 3 years learning every inch of this land, every hiding spot, every angle. The first shot came from Nashota, positioned on the ridge north of the house. Her Winchester barked, and one of Crow's men went down, clutching his shoulder. The rest scattered, looking for cover that wasn't there. Cole fired from the house window, dropped another. Flint's shotgun roared from the barn, catching a 3rd man in a spray of buckshot. It should have ended there, should have sent the survivors running, but these were professionals, and they rallied fast. Crow's voice cut through the gunfire, directing his men, organizing a proper assault. For 30 minutes the ranch became a battlefield. Bullets punched through the walls, shattered windows, kicked up dust. Cole took a ricochet to the shoulder that spun him around but didn't put him down. Maria fired Frank's revolver with shaking hands, more to make noise than with any hope of hitting anything. Then Flint's reinforcements arrived. 5 men on horseback, townspeople who'd decided they were tired of Silas Crow running Prescott like his own private kingdom. Tom Baker, the butcher, Samuel Grant, who owned the livery, Doc Hollis, and 2 miners whose names Cole didn't know. They came in shooting, caught Crow's men in a crossfire. The tide turned fast. 2 more of Crow's men went down. The rest, including Crow himself, broke and ran, but they left 1 behind, wounded, bleeding from a bullet in his gut. Amos Pike, Silas Crow's second in command. They dragged him inside the house, laid him on Cole's table. Doc Hollis looked at the wound and shook his head. "He's got maybe an hour. 2 if he's tough." Cole leaned over the dying man. "Talk to me, Amos. Tell me what I need to know, and I'll make sure you die easy." Amos laughed, and blood bubbled at his lips. "What's it matter? I'm dead. You're dead. Everybody's dead. Blackwell won't stop. He can't. Too much at stake. Tell me about the 50 men. Coming from New Mexico, hired guns. Best money can buy. Be here in 3 days." Amos coughed, spattering blood. "You think you won tonight? You ain't won nothing. You just made them mad." Why does Blackwell want us dead so bad? It's more than just Nashada's testimony. The contract. Frank found the original, the one with all the signatures. Proves the governor himself authorized the massacre. Proves Blackwell arranged it. That gets out, they all hang. Every last one of them. Where's the original? Blackwell's got it. In his office in Phoenix, personal safe. He's the secretary of TM&S, real secretary. Everything goes through him. Cole and Nashota exchanged looks. Then that's where we go, Cole said. We get that contract, we take it to federal court. We end this. Amos tried to laugh again, but it came out as a wet gurgle. You're dead men walking, all of you. He died 2 minutes later, still trying to smile. Outside, night had fallen completely. The ranch was quiet except for the wind and the distant cry of a coyote. Cole stood on his porch looking at the stars, thinking about Frank, about promises, about how far a man would go to honor his word. Nashota came to stand beside him. Phoenix is 2 days' ride, she said. We can't get there and back before those 50 men arrive. I know. So what do we do? Cole thought about it. About all the pieces on the board. About Blackwell and the governor and the whole corrupt machinery of territorial politics. About one old marshal and an Apache woman and a blacksmith with a wooden leg trying to bring it all down. We split up, he said finally. Some of us go to Phoenix, get that contract. The rest stay here, hold the ranch, buy time. That's suicide. Maybe, but it's the only play we've got. In the distance, thunder rumbled. A storm was coming. Cole could smell it on the wind. Rain and lightning and the kind of darkness that hid sins and secrets, but also sometimes the kind that washed things clean. He looked at Nashota, at Flint, at Maria and the townspeople who'd risked their lives to help strangers, at the future uncertain and violent rushing toward them like that storm. Get some rest, Cole said. Tomorrow we ride for Phoenix. And in the darkness unseen, the machinery of conspiracy turned. 50 hired guns saddled their horses in New Mexico. Harrison Blackwell burned papers in his Phoenix office, and somewhere out in the desert night, Silas Crow planned his revenge. The game was not over. It had only just begun. The trap. Dawn came cold and clear, painting the mountains gold and crimson. Cole Brennan stood at the window of his ranch house, watching the sun climb, knowing it might be one of the last sunrises he'd ever see. His leg had stiffened overnight, the wound hot to the touch, despite Maria's ministrations. Infection was setting in. He had maybe 3 days before fever took him. 3 days to get to Phoenix, steal the contract, and get back alive. Not good odds. But then nothing about this had ever been good odds. Behind him, Nashota was loading weapons with the methodical precision of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Winchester, 2 Colts, ammunition enough for a small war. She hadn't slept. Cole could see it in the set of her shoulders, the way her hands moved just a fraction too quickly, betraying the adrenaline still singing through her veins from last night's firefight. Flint Walker sat at the table sketching a map of Phoenix from memory. His wooden leg creaked as he shifted position, a sound that had become as familiar as breathing over the past 12 hours. He'd proven himself last night. Proven that a man with one leg could still fight like the devil himself when the cause was right. Maria was outside talking quietly with Tom Baker and the others who'd stayed. Good men, brave men. Men who were about to be asked to do something that might get them all killed. Here's how it has to go, Cole said, breaking the silence. We fake Nashota's death. Make Crow and Blackwell think they've won. That buys us time to get to Phoenix while they're celebrating. Nashota looked up from the weapons. Fake my death, how? Fire. Another one. We stage it here at the ranch. Make it look like you died in the blaze. Leave a body burned beyond recognition. What body? Tom Baker's got a pig. Big one. About your size. We dress it in your clothes. Burn it in the cabin while Crow's men are watching. They see the building go up. See us running. See someone who looks like you not running. They'll believe what they want to believe. It was a grim plan. Brutal in its simplicity, but it might work. "And while they think I'm dead," Nashota asked, "you ride with me and Flint to Phoenix. We break into Blackwell's office, steal the original contract, the one with all the signatures, the one that proves the governor and Blackwell and the whole corrupt chain of command ordered the massacre at Canyon de Chelly." "Breaking into the deputy governor's office," Nashota's voice was flat. "That's not a plan. That's suicide." "Got a better idea?" She was quiet for a moment, then shook her head. "No, but I want to be clear about something. When this goes wrong, and it will go wrong, I'm not running. Not again. I've been running for 5 years. I'm done." Cole met her eyes, saw the steel there, the absolute conviction. "Fair enough," he said. "When it goes wrong, we fight." They spent the morning preparing the deception. Tom Baker brought the pig a massive sow that must have weighed close to 200 pounds. They dressed it in Nashota's spare clothes, the ones she'd been wearing when Frank bought her at the auction, positioned it in the cabin's bedroom near the window where anyone watching would see. Then they waited. Crow's men returned just after noon. 3 of them this time, keeping their distance, watching from the ridge to the east. Cautious now, respectful of what had happened last night. Cole gave them something to see. He stumbled out of the cabin, clutching his leg, making a show of his wound, collapsed near the well. Maria ran to help him, her voice carrying across the valley, high and frightened. The watchers on the ridge would hear, would report back to Crow that Cole Brennan was failing, that the infection was taking him. Inside the cabin, Flint doused the bedroom with lamp oil, piled kindling against the walls, set it all ready to burn. At sunset they lit the fire. It caught fast, racing up the walls, consuming the dry wood with terrifying speed. Flames burst through the roof. Smoke rose black and thick against the darkening sky. Cole and Maria ran from the building, coughing, stumbling. The watchers on the ridge stood straining to see, looking for Nashota. She appeared at the bedroom window for just a moment, just long enough for them to see her silhouette against the flames, see her trying to open the window, see her fail, see her fall back into the inferno. The pig burned, the clothes burned, and from a distance, through smoke and flame and the failing light of dusk, it looked exactly like an Apache woman dying in a fire. One of the watchers rode hard for town, no doubt to report the good news to Silas Crow. The other 2 stayed, making sure no one tried to fight the blaze, making sure it burned down to ash and bone. They were still watching when Cole, Maria, Flint, and Nashota slipped out the back, moving through the twilight shadows toward the horses they'd hidden in a draw half a mile north. By the time the watchers realized the deception, they'd be 20 miles away, riding hard for Phoenix. The ride took 2 days and a night, pushing the horses to their limits. They avoided the main roads, stuck to game trails and smuggler paths, places where 3 riders wouldn't draw attention. Cole's leg got worse. The infection spread, bringing fever with it. By the second morning he was shaking with chills despite the desert heat, his vision swimming in and out of focus. But he kept riding, kept moving forward through sheer bloody-minded stubbornness and the memory of Frank's voice in his ear. "Finish it. Promise me." Flint rode beside him, close enough to catch Cole if he fell from the saddle. They talked to pass the time, to keep Cole conscious. And in those long hours under the burning sun, Flint told his story. "I was 22 when they recruited me," Flint said. His voice was distant, lost in memory. "Fresh off a cavalry tour in Kansas. Knew the frontier, knew how to track, knew the land. Army said they needed scouts for a special operation. Removal of hostile Apache from disputed territory. Clean. Professional. By the book." He paused, adjusting his wooden leg in the stirrup. Silas Crow was the commander. Not official, you understand, just a civilian contractor. But he had the authority, had the papers, said it came straight from the territorial governor, said we were protecting settlers, protecting progress. "You believed him," Nashota said. "It wasn't a question. I was 22. What did I know?" Flint's voice held infinite bitterness. "Led them straight to your village. Showed them the best approach, the weak points in your defenses. Told them when the warriors would be out hunting, when only women and children would be there. The silence that followed was profound. I didn't know what they were going to do, Flint continued. Thought it was just relocation, rounding up families, moving them to the reservation. That's what they told me, what I told myself. But you stayed, Nashota said. After the shooting started, you could have left. I was a coward. Froze, watched it happen and did nothing. Flint's hands tightened on the reins. After when the Army came to investigate, I told them what I'd seen. All of it. Names, details, everything. They thanked me, told me I'd done my duty. Then they buried my report so deep it might as well have never existed. That's when you left the cavalry. No, that's when I tried to kill myself. Flint's voice was matter-of-fact, almost clinical. Put my service revolver in my mouth and pulled the trigger. Misfire. Cylinder was fouled. Gun didn't go off. Took it as a sign. Mustered out instead. Learned blacksmithing. Figured I could at least make something instead of destroying everything I touched. Cole understood that impulse, that desperate need to build something, anything, to balance out all the destruction. That's why he'd bought the ranch, why he'd spent 3 years mending fences and raising cattle and trying to forget. Some things couldn't be forgotten. Some debts couldn't be paid. They reached Phoenix at midnight on the second day. The territorial capital was larger than Prescott, more permanent, with brick buildings and gas streetlights and the unmistakable smell of money and power. The governor's mansion sat on a hill overlooking the city. The territorial offices clustered around it like courtiers around a king. Harrison Blackwell's office was in the largest of these buildings, a 3-story structure that housed the territorial administration. Flint had scouted it earlier during his cavalry days when he'd delivered dispatches to the territorial secretary. He knew the layout, knew where Blackwell kept his private office, knew about the safe. Getting in was the easy part. A window on the second floor poorly latched, a drainage pipe that would bear a man's weight if he climbed carefully. They went in just after 2 in the morning, when the watchman was at the far end of his rounds. Flint went first, despite his wooden leg moving with surprising agility. Then Nashota. Then Cole. His wounded leg screaming with every movement, darkness crept into his peripheral vision. But he made it. Pulled himself through the window and collapsed on the floor, breathing hard, tasting blood. Blackwell's office was opulent. Thick carpet, mahogany furniture, oil paintings of stern-faced men in suits. The safe sat behind a portrait of the territorial governor, a heavy iron box built into the wall. Flint had the combination, had gotten it from a woman who cleaned the offices who'd watched Blackwell open the safe enough times to memorize the sequence. 32, 17, 8. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside, stacks of papers, ledgers, account books, and there in a leather folder, identical to the one Frank had left in the safety deposit box, the original contracts. Cole's hands shook as he opened the folder, saw the signatures: Governor William Bradford, Harrison Blackwell, John Sutherland, Judge Edmund Morris, Sheriff Henry Cole. All of them, every man in the conspiracy, their names in black ink on cream-colored paper, authorizing the removal of Apache people by any means necessary from land worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was proof, irrefutable, damning, and it was theirs. The alarm bell started ringing when they were halfway down the drainage pipe. Someone had seen them, or heard them, or maybe just gotten lucky on their rounds. It didn't matter. What mattered was the sudden blaze of lights in windows, the shouting, the sound of running feet. They hit the ground and ran, through alleys, across streets. Nashota leading Cole, stumbling behind Flint, bringing up the rear despite his wooden leg. Bullets whined past them. A window shattered to Cole's left. He fired back blindly, more to slow pursuit than with any hope of hitting anything. They reached the horses, mounted, rode. Behind them, Phoenix woke up. Bells rang. Men shouted. A posse formed with terrifying speed, but by the time they were organized enough to give chase, Cole and the others were already 3 miles out, pushing their horses hard through the desert night. They didn't stop until dawn. Didn't slow down until the lights of Phoenix had disappeared behind the horizon, and Cole was sure they'd lost their pursuers in the darkness. When they finally dismounted, Cole's leg buckled. He went down hard, tasted dirt and blood, felt hands on him rolling him over, voices speaking, but the words didn't make sense anymore. The fever had him now, had him good and proper. His last coherent thought was that they had the contract, they had the proof. Frank hadn't died for nothing. Then darkness took him, and he knew nothing more. He woke in a bed that wasn't his, in a room that smelled of carbolic and medicine. Sunlight streamed through a window. His leg was bandaged properly this time, the wound cleaned and stitched. The fever had broken. Maria sat in a chair beside the bed, her face creased with worry that eased when she saw his eyes open. "Welcome back," she said. "You've been out for 2 days." 2 days. Cole's mind raced. "The contract, where is it?" "Safe. Nashota has it. We're in Tucson now. Federal courthouse. Judge Morris helped us get here." Judge Morris, the one name on the list Frank had marked as honest, the one man in the whole corrupt machinery who'd refused the bribes. "Where is he? I need to talk to him." Maria's face changed, went still and sad. "Cole, Judge Morris is dead. Someone killed him yesterday, made it look like a heart attack, but his office was ransacked, and the copy of the contract we'd given him for safekeeping is gone." The words hit Cole like a physical blow. Another good man dead. Another piece removed from the board. "Who?" he asked, but he already knew the answer. "We don't know, but there's only a handful of people who knew we were here, who knew Morris had those documents." Maria leaned forward. "Cole, we think there's a mole, someone in our group who's feeding information to Blackwell. A mole, a traitor, someone they'd trusted who'd been selling them out from the start." Cole tried to sit up, failed. His body wasn't ready yet, but his mind was racing, going through the possibilities. Flint, Maria, the townspeople who'd helped them. Tom Baker, Samuel Grant, Doc Hollis. One of them was working for Blackwell, had been all along. "Where's Nashota?" Cole asked, questioning people, trying to find who talked. "She's furious, Cole. Says she's going to kill whoever betrayed us." Cole believed it. Had seen the look in Nashota's eyes, the cold determination of someone who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose. "Help me up," he said. "You need to rest. I need to find the traitor before Nashota does, because if she finds them first, we'll lose our only lead to whoever's coordinating Blackwell's moves in Tucson." Maria helped him stand. The room spun, but Cole forced himself to focus, forced himself to walk one painful step at a time out into the hallway. They found Nashota in the courthouse basement, standing over the bound form of Sheriff Hiram Cole's deputy, the young man who'd been helping them gather information in Prescott, the one who'd seemed so eager to assist. His face was bruised, blood dripped from his split lip, and in his eyes Cole saw the confirmation he'd been dreading. Guilty. "He confessed," Nashota said flatly. "Sold us out for $1,000, told Blackwell everything, where we were going, what we were planning, everything." The deputy wouldn't meet Cole's eyes. "I got a family," he whispered. "Blackwell said he'd hurt them if I didn't cooperate, said he'd kill my wife, my children. So you got Judge Morris killed instead." Nashota's voice was ice. "You got good people killed to save your own skin." "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Cole looked at the pathetic figure on the floor, felt no anger, only a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. "Where is Blackwell now?" he asked. "Phoenix, but he's moving. The 50 men from New Mexico arrived yesterday. He's bringing them to Tucson. Says he's going to end this once and for all. Says nobody testifies, nobody lives. 50 professional killers, coming to Tucson, coming for them." Cole looked at Nashota, saw his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. They'd won the battle, gotten the contract, exposed the conspiracy, but the war was just beginning. And somewhere out there in the desert, an army was coming to bury the truth, along with everyone who knew it. "How long?" Cole asked. "How long until they get here?" The deputy's voice was barely a whisper. "Tomorrow. They'll be here tomorrow." Dark night. The safe house was an adobe building on the outskirts of Tucson, owned by a merchant who owed Judge Morris a favor and didn't ask questions. 3 rooms, thick walls, a view of the approach from any direction. It would have to do. Cole sat at the table in the main room, the stolen contract spread before him, and felt the weight of failure pressing down like a physical thing. Frank was dead. Judge Morris was dead. The deputies' betrayal had cost them their only ally in the territorial justice system. And tomorrow, 50 hired guns would descend on Tucson to finish what Silas Crow had started on the Wickenburg Trail. His leg throbbed. The infection was under control, but the wound would leave him with a limp for the rest of his life. However long that turned out to be. Maria stood by the window, keeping watch. Flint was checking weapons, moving from rifle to pistol to shotgun with the methodical precision of a man who knew they were about to need every bullet they could muster. The townspeople who'd followed them from Prescott huddled in the corner, their earlier enthusiasm replaced by the cold reality of what was coming. Tom Baker had already left, riding back to Prescott with apologies and fear in his eyes. Samuel Grant looked like he wanted to follow. Doc Hollis stayed, but his hands shook when he tried to load his rifle. They were down to 8 people. Maybe 9 if Cole counted himself, which seemed generous given he could barely walk. 8 people against 50 professional killers. The math was simple, the outcome inevitable. "We've lost," Cole said. The words came out flat empty. "We got the contract. We exposed the conspiracy, but without a judge to present it to, without protection, it's just paper. And tomorrow, Blackwell burns the paper and us with it." Nashota had been standing in the doorway, silent as a ghost. Now she crossed the room in 3 strides and slammed her hand down on the table hard enough to make the contract jump. "So that's it." Her voice was low, dangerous. "That's your plan? Give up, let them win. I'm being realistic." "You're being a coward." The word hit Cole like a slap. He looked up, met her eyes, saw the fury there, the absolute refusal to surrender. "I watched my family die," Nashota said, each word precise as a knife thrust. "Watched my sister bleed out in the dirt while men like Silas Crow laughed. Spent 5 years in a cell being treated like an animal. And I survived. Not because I gave up, because I refused to let them break me. This is different. No, it's exactly the same. You think you're saving me, protecting me. But I don't need protection. I need justice. And if you're too tired or too hurt or too scared to help me get it, then get out of my way." Cole opened his mouth to argue, closed it, because she was right. He had been thinking of himself as her protector, her savior, the white marshal who'd swoop in and make everything right. But Nashota didn't need saving, never had. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket, spread it on the table beside the contract. It was a list of names, 7 of them, Apache names Cole didn't recognize. "While you were unconscious, I wasn't sitting idle," Nashota said. "Maria and I have been working, gathering people. The ones who survived other attacks like Canyon de Shelley, the ones who've been hiding, afraid to speak. 7 witnesses," Maria confirmed from the window, "scattered across the territory, but willing to testify if they knew it would matter. 1 witness Blackwell can silence," Nashota continued. 8 witnesses. That's harder, especially if they all tell the same story, if they all point to the same conspiracy, the same men." Cole looked at the list, saw hope there, saw possibility. "Where are they?" "Close. 3 are already in Tucson, 4 more within a day's ride. Maria sent word. They're coming. To what? To die alongside us when Blackwell's army arrives. To testify." Nashota's eyes were fierce. "To stand up. To stop running. Because I told them the truth. That we have proof now. Real proof. Documents with signatures. And that if we can just survive long enough to get in front of a federal court, We can bring the whole corrupt system down. There's no federal court in Tucson, no federal judge. There will be. Maria turned from the window. I sent a telegram to Fort Lowell. To the U.S. Marshal there. Told him everything. He's sending riders to Santa Fe, to the federal courthouse. A judge is coming. Should be here in 4 days. 4 days. It might as well have been 4 years. Blackwell will be here tomorrow, Cole said. Then we hold out for 4 days. Against 50 men, we won't last 4 hours. Flint looked up from the weapons. What if we don't have to fight all 50 at once? Everyone turned to look at him. The canyon, Flint said. Granite Creek Canyon north of Cole's ranch. I scouted it years ago. Narrow, high walls, only 2 ways in. You could hold that position with 10 men against 100 if you had the high ground and enough ammunition. Cole knew the canyon, had ridden through it a dozen times. Flint was right. It was defensible. But it was also 30 miles from Tucson, 30 miles of open desert where 50 riders could run them down like dogs. We'd never make it there, he said. We would if they didn't know we were going, Nashota said. If they thought we were still here in Tucson, holed up, waiting. Maria was nodding, seeing where this was going. We leave someone behind. Make noise, make them think we're all here. By the time they realize it's a deception, we're already at the canyon, dug in, ready. It was insane, brilliant and insane in equal measure, but it might work. Who stays behind? Cole asked. I will. Doc Hollis stepped forward. His hands had stopped shaking. I'm no fighter. Be more useful here, making them think there's a whole group than I would be in a canyon with a rifle I can barely shoot. They'll kill you when they figure it out. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just a scared old doctor who got caught up in something bigger than he understood. Maybe they let me live. Doc Hollis smiled, but there was no humor in it. Either way, I'm done running. Frank Cassidy was my friend. He deserved better than what he got. If I can buy you 4 days by making noise in this house, then that's what I'll do. The decision was made. They spent the rest of the day preparing, moved weapons and ammunition to the canyon in small loads, careful not to draw attention, brought the witnesses in one at a time, quiet and cautious. By sunset, they had 11 people total, 8 who could fight, 3 who would testify. Not an army, but maybe enough. The ride to the canyon took 6 hours, moving through darkness, picking their way along game trails and dry washes. Cole's legs screamed with every jolt, but he gritted his teeth and kept going. Behind him, the witnesses rode in silence, their faces grave in the moonlight. They reached Granite Creek Canyon just before dawn. The place was exactly as Flint had described, 200 yards long, sheer walls rising 60 feet on either side. The creek itself was a trickle this time of year, barely ankle-deep running down the center. At the north end, the canyon opened onto Cole's ranch. At the south end, it narrowed to a bottleneck barely wide enough for 2 horses abreast. Perfect for an ambush, perfect for a last stand. They set to work immediately. Flint directed the placement of firing positions on the canyon rim. Natural depressions in the rock that would provide cover. Places where a shooter could pour fire down into the killing ground below and be almost impossible to dislodge. Cole supervised the placement of obstacles. Deadfall trees dragged across the narrow southern entrance, rocks piled to create barriers, anything to slow an advancing force, to make them bunch up, to turn them into targets. Nashota worked with the witnesses explaining what would happen, how they needed to stay hidden until the fighting was over. How their testimony was the whole point of this stand, how they had to survive no matter what. By midday, they were as ready as they would ever be. Cole stood at the southern end of the canyon, looking out across the desert toward Tucson. Somewhere out there, Blackwell's army was gathering. 50 men who killed for money, who had no stake in this beyond their pay, who would walk away the moment the job got too costly. That was the weakness, not ideological commitment, just greed. If they could make it expensive enough, bloody enough, maybe some of those 50 would decide their pay wasn't worth dying for. It was a thin hope. But it was all they had. Flint came to stand beside him. You know we're probably all going to die here. I know. Frank would have liked this, going out fighting for something that mattered. Cole thought about his friend, about Frank's determination to see justice done, about the promise Cole had made. Yeah, he would have. You think it'll work? You think the judge will get here in time? I think we're going to make it work, because the alternative is unacceptable. They stood in silence for a moment, two old soldiers looking out at the field where they would make their stand, where they would either triumph or die trying. There's something you should know, Flint said quietly, about Canyon de Shelley, about what really happened there. Cole turned to look at him. I told you I was the scout, that I led them there, but I didn't tell you everything. Flint's jaw tightened. There was supposed to be a warning. Silas promised, said we'd give them a chance to leave peacefully, relocate to the reservation, bloodless. But that's not what happened. No, we got there at dawn. I was supposed to go in first, talk to the chief, explain the situation. But Silas said no, said the orders had changed, said we were to engage immediately, maximum force. So you led them into a massacre. I led them into what I thought was a relocation. By the time I realized what was really happening, it was too late. The shooting had started. Flint's voice cracked. I saw things that day. Saw Silas personally execute a woman trying to protect her children. Saw his men burn lodges with people still in deed. Saw them laughing while they did it. Why are you telling me this now? Because if I die tomorrow, I want someone to know the truth. Want it on record. That this wasn't soldiers following orders. This was murder. Premeditated, planned. And the men who ordered it are still walking free. Cole put his hand on Flint's shoulder. We're going to make sure everyone knows. That's the whole point of this. Night fell over the canyon. They ate a cold meal, not daring to light fires that might give away their position. The witnesses huddled together in a cave halfway up the western wall protected by rock and shadows. The fighters spread out along the rim, taking turns on watch. Cole tried to sleep but couldn't. His mind kept circling back to Frank, to Judge Morris, to all the people who'd died trying to expose this conspiracy, to the very real possibility that by this time tomorrow he'd be joining them. Nashota found him just after midnight, sitting on a boulder overlooking the southern approach. Can't sleep? She asked. Too much on my mind. She sat beside him. For a long moment neither spoke. The desert stretched out before them silver in the moonlight, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. My sister's name was Kaya, Nashota said suddenly. She was the gentle one, always singing, always finding beauty in small things. A flower growing in a crack in the rock, the way sunlight hit water. She wanted to be a healer. You don't have to tell me this. I want to, because tomorrow we might die. And I want someone to remember that she existed. That she was more than just a name on a list of victims. That she was a person, with dreams, with a future that was stolen from her. Cole understood that need, that desperate desire to make sure the dead were remembered, honored. Tell me about her, he said. So she did. Talked through the small hours of the morning about her sister, about their childhood, about the games they played and the trouble they got into, about how Kaya had been courted by a boy from another band, how they'd planned to marry in the spring, about how that spring never came. When she finished, tears were streaming down her face, the first Cole had ever seen her shed. Thank you, she said, for listening, for caring, for not giving up even when it would have been easier. I made a promise to Frank. I keep my promises. This is bigger than a promise now. This is about making sure what happened to Kaya never happens again. Then we better make sure we survive tomorrow. Nashota nodded, wiped her eyes, stood. Get some sleep, Cole Brennan. Tomorrow we make history, one way or another. She walked away, disappearing into the darkness. Cole sat alone watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the distant cry of a coyote. Thinking about promises and justice, and the price men paid for doing what was right. Thinking about tomorrow. Dawn would bring Blackwell's army, would bring fire and blood and violence, would bring the final test of whether 8 people could stand against 50 and live to tell about it. The odds were terrible. The stakes were everything. And somewhere out there in the darkness, destiny was riding hard, bringing with it the answer to a question Cole had been avoiding for 5 years. Could one man make a difference? Could honor and justice triumph over corruption and greed? Tomorrow they would find out. Cole lay back against the rock, closed his eyes, and let exhaustion finally take him. His last thought before sleep claimed him was of Frank, of his old friend's voice in his ear. Finish it. Promise me. He had promised. And tomorrow, come hell or high water, he would keep that promise, or die trying. Justice and legacy. They came at dawn. Cole saw them from his position on the canyon rim, a dark mass moving across the desert floor like a spreading stain. 50 riders, maybe more. They moved in formation, disciplined, professional. These weren't cowboys or drifters. These were soldiers, men who'd fought in the war, men who knew their business. Silas Crow rode at the front, his duster flapping in the morning wind. Even from 200 yards, Cole could see the set of his shoulders, the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. Beside Cole, Flint checked his rifle one last time. Here we go. Down below in the narrow mouth of the canyon, the obstacles they'd placed looked suddenly inadequate. A few trees, some rocks, nothing that would stop determined men for long. Cole raised his hand, waited. Let them get closer. 100 yards, 75, 50. The lead riders reached the canyon entrance, paused. Crow's voice carried on the still morning air, giving orders. Scouts dismounted, moved forward cautiously, checking the deadfall for traps. Cole dropped his hand. The canyon exploded. Rifle fire erupted from both rims. Nashota's first shot took a scout in the chest. Flint's second dropped a horse. Maria, positioned 20 yards to Cole's right, fired 3 times in rapid succession, disciplined, controlled, making every bullet count. Below, chaos. Men scrambled for cover that didn't exist. Horses reared and screamed. The narrow canyon mouth became a killing ground, bodies piling up, as the defenders poured fire down from positions that were almost impossible to assault. For 10 minutes, it was a slaughter. Then Crow rallied his men, got them organized, started returning fire, forcing the defenders to keep their heads down. He split his force, sent 20 men to find another way up to the rim, kept the rest providing covering fire. Smart. Exactly what Cole would have done. They're flanking. Flint shouted over the gunfire. East side, Cole saw them. Riders dismounting, starting to climb the canyon wall where the slope was gentler. If they made it to the rim, the defenders' advantage would evaporate. It would become a close-quarters fight. And in that kind of fight, numbers mattered. Nashota, Cole called, take 3 people. East rim, stop them. She was moving before he finished, speaking fluid as water, deadly as a snake. Samuel Grant and 2 of the Apache witnesses followed her, their faces grim but determined. The battle fragmented into a dozen smaller fights. Cole focused on the canyon mouth where Crow's main force was trying to force their way through the obstacles. Every time a man got close to moving a tree or pushing aside a rock, Cole put a bullet near him. Not all was hitting, but making them cautious, making them slow. Time. That's what they needed. 4 days for the federal judge to arrive. 4 days to keep these witnesses alive. They'd been fighting for less than an hour. His rifle clicked empty. Cole reloaded, fingers moving by muscle memory. Around him, the canyon was a storm of noise, gunfire, shouting, the screams of wounded men and dying horses, the smell of powder smoke thick enough to choke on. A bullet struck the rock 6 inches from his head, showering him with stone chips. He ducked, moved to a new position, came up firing. Saw a man in the canyon below clutching his leg, crawling for cover. Saw another, lying still, blood pooling beneath him. How many had they killed? 10, 15. Not enough. There were still 30 men down there. Still enough to overwhelm them through sheer numbers. Movement on the east rim. Nashota and her group engaged in brutal close-quarters fighting. She'd dropped her rifle, was using her knife now, moving through Crow's men like death itself. One went down with his throat cut. Another fell screaming over the rim 50 feet to the rocks below, but there were too many. For every man she killed, 2 more came. Samuel Grant went down, clutching his shoulder. One of the witnesses took a bullet to the head, dropped without a sound. They were being pushed back. Cole made a decision. Flint, hold this position. Don't let anyone through that mouth. Where are you going? To even the odds. He moved along the rim, using the rocks for cover his wounded leg, screaming with every step. Reached the point where Crow's men were climbing, found 3 of them almost to the top, pulling themselves up the last few feet. Cole's peacemaker spoke 4 times. 3 men fell. The 4th shot missed, but it made the climbers below duck, lose their grip, slide back down. Then his gun was empty, and there were more men coming, and Cole was out of ammunition for the peacemaker. He drew Frank's revolver from his belt, the weapon his friend had carried for 20 years, the weapon that had saved Cole's life in Tombstone. It felt right in his hand, like Frank was there beside him. He fired until that gun was empty too. Then he picked up rocks and threw them. Anything to slow the advance, anything to buy more time. A figure appeared at the rim, not one of Crow's men, Nashota. Her face was streaked with blood and dirt and something that might have been tears, but her eyes were clear, focused. "They're through on the south," she said. "At the mouth. Flint's position is being overrun." Cole looked back toward where he'd left Flint, saw smoke, saw figures moving, saw the barrel of Flint's rifle still poking over the rocks, but firing less frequently now. They'd held for an hour, maybe 90 minutes, not enough, not nearly enough. "Fall back to the cave," Cole said. "Get the witnesses deep. Protect them. That's all that matters now. And you, I'm going to finish this." He didn't wait for her response, moved back along the rim toward the canyon mouth, toward where Silas Crow had to be, because this had always been about Crow, about the man who'd pulled the trigger at Canyon de Shelley, who'd killed Frank, who represented everything Cole had spent 3 years trying to escape. Some things you couldn't escape, some fights you couldn't avoid. He found Crow in the canyon, directing his men with hand signals, coordinating the assault with the calm competence of a born commander. The man looked up, saw Cole limping along the rim, and smiled. "Brennan," Crow's voice carried clearly, "you've had your fun. Cost me 15 good men. But it's over now. Come down. Surrender. Maybe I let some of you live." Cole didn't answer, just started down the slope, half-sliding, using rocks to control his descent. His leg gave out halfway. He fell the last 20 feet, landed hard-rolled, came up with Frank's empty revolver in his hand. Crow was waiting. They stood 30 feet apart in the narrow canyon. Around them, the battle raged. But for this moment, it was just the 2 of them. 2 men who'd been circling each other since that day on the Wickenburg Trail. "You're out of ammunition," Crow observed. "So are you." Cole could see Crow's gun belt, empty loops where cartridges should have been. The man had fired everything he had. Crow smiled, drew a knife from his boot, 12 inches of steel honed to a razor edge. Cole felt the weight of his own knife at his belt. The one he'd carried since his martial days. Not as fancy as Crow's, but it had kept him alive this long. They moved at the same time. The fight was brutal, desperate. 2 men who knew that only one would walk away. Crow was faster, more skilled with a blade. But Cole was bigger, stronger, and he had something Crow didn't. He had nothing left to lose. Their knives met with a screech of steel on steel. Crow twisted, tried to get inside Cole's guard. Cole blocked, shoved him back, pressed forward. His wounded leg nearly betrayed him. He stumbled. Crow's blade slashed across his ribs, opening a long cut that burned like fire. Cole ignored it. Drove forward. Got his free hand on Crow's wrist. Squeezed. Felt bones grind together. Crow's knife fell from nerveless fingers. But Crow had tricks left. Brought his knee up into Cole's wounded leg. The pain was blinding. Cole went down. Crow dove for the fallen knife. Cole caught his ankle, held on. Crow kicked, connecting with Cole's jaw. Stars exploded across his vision, but he didn't let go. Couldn't let go. They grappled in the dirt, trading blows. No technique now, no skill. Just two exhausted men trying to kill each other with their bare hands. Cole got on top. Drove his fist into Crow's face once, twice, 3 times. Felt cartilage crunch. Felt blood splash hot across his knuckles. Crow bucked, threw Cole off, scrambled for his knife. Got it. Raised it high. Crow bucked, threw Cole off, scrambled for his knife. Got it. Started to raise it, then stopped. Blood was spreading across his chest. He looked down at it, confused. Then up at the canyon rim where Nashota stood, Winchester smoking in her hands. He fell backward, hit the ground hard. Cole crawled over to him. Crow's pale eyes found his. The knife slipped from his fingers. "You want to know the truth?" Crow's voice was wet, bubbling. "The real truth." Cole said nothing, just waited. Canyon de Chelly wasn't supposed to be a massacre. Each word came harder. Orders were relocation, peaceful removal, get them to the reservation, no violence unless they resisted. "Liar," Nashota called from above, but she didn't shoot again. "No." Crow coughed blood. "When we got there, your warriors fought back, killed 3 of my men in the first minute. My men panicked, started shooting everything, women, children. I tried to stop it. God help me, I tried, but it was too late. It became something else." Cole felt ice in his chest. "You expect us to believe that I'm dying. Why would I lie?" Crow's eyes found Nashota. "I kept you alive. After. Could have killed you. My men wanted to, but I said no. Put you in that cell because I'd already killed too many children that day. You kept me in a cage for 5 years. Because if I released you, if you testified, they'd hang me. Blackwell, Bradford, all of them. They wanted it buried." His breathing was getting shallower. "I'm not asking forgiveness, just wanted you to know. It wasn't supposed to." His eyes found Cole's one last time, and in them, Cole saw something he hadn't expected. Relief. "That's for my sister," Nashota said quietly from above. "And for all the others." The light faded from Silas Crow's pale blue eyes. His last breath escaped as a sigh. Cole stood, looked up at Nashota. She was lowering the rifle, her face unreadable. "Did you believe him?" she asked. "I don't know," Cole said honestly. "Maybe it doesn't matter. He still pulled the trigger. He still killed them. But if he's telling the truth, if it was supposed to be peaceful, then Blackwell and Bradford have even more to answer for." The shot came from above. Crow jerked, looked down at the red stains spreading across his chest, looked up at the canyon rim where Nashota stood, Winchester smoking in her hands. The sound that followed was the most beautiful thing Cole had ever heard. Bugles. He pulled himself to his feet, looked south toward the canyon mouth, saw blue uniforms, saw the flag of the United States Cavalry, saw 30 riders pouring into the canyon, weapons ready, voices shouting for surrender. U.S. Marshals, federal troops from Fort Lowell, right on time. The battle ended in minutes. Crow's men, leaderless and outnumbered, threw down their weapons. Some tried to run. The cavalry hunted them down. Within an hour, 23 men were in custody. 12 more were dead. The rest had scattered into the desert, but posses were already forming to track them. The commander of the Marshal Force was a lean man in his 50s named James Dutton. He had iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much of the world's ugliness to be surprised by anything. He found Cole sitting on a rock being bandaged by Doc Hollis, who'd somehow survived his diversionary stand in Tucson and ridden with the marshals. "Deputy Marshal Brennan," Dutton said. "Or should I say, former Deputy Marshal Frank Cassidy sent a telegram to my office 3 weeks ago, detailed everything, the conspiracy, the contracts, the names. Said if anything happened to him, we should investigate. He's dead. I know. We found his body on the Wickenburg Trail, gave him a proper burial, with honors." Dutton's jaw tightened. He was a good man, one of the best. And he was right about everything. We've had investigators looking into territorial mining and smelting for 2 weeks, found enough evidence to hang every man involved, including Blackwell. Especially Blackwell. We arrested him this morning in Phoenix. He tried to run, didn't get far. Dutton pulled out a folded warrant. We also have warrants for Governor Bradford, John Sutherland, and 15 others. This whole thing is going federal. Tucson. Federal courthouse. Federal judge arriving tomorrow from Santa Fe. Tomorrow. 1 day late. But they'd held. Against impossible odds, they'd held long enough. Cole looked up at the canyon rim where Nashotah stood with the witnesses. 8 Apache men and women who'd survived genocide and lived to tell about it, who would stand in front of a federal judge and speak truth to power. They'll testify, Cole said. All of them. And they'll tell the world exactly what happened at Canyon de Chelly and a dozen other places, what your government authorized, what men like Blackwell and Bradford enabled. Good, Dutton said simply, because America needs to hear it. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Federal Courthouse, Tucson, December 1877. The largest courtroom in the territory packed every day with spectators. Newspaper reporters from San Francisco to New York. Sketch artists capturing scenes for the illustrated papers. And at the center of it all, 8 Apache witnesses telling their stories. Nashotah testified for 4 hours. Spoke in clear, precise English about the morning Canyon de Chelly burned, about watching her sister die, about the men in Army uniforms who weren't soldiers, about overhearing Silas Crow mention payments from a mining company. The other witnesses corroborated, told of similar attacks in New Mexico, Colorado, Nevada, all with the same pattern. Mercenaries in military dress, attacks on civilian populations, land that ended up in the hands of mining companies within months. The documents Frank had collected sealed the case, the contracts with their signatures, the ledgers showing payments, the geological surveys proving the land's value. All of it laid out in black and white, impossible to deny. Harrison Blackwell was convicted on 17 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, sentenced to life in federal prison. Governor William Bradford resigned before charges could be filed. Fled to Mexico, died there 6 months later, some said, by his own hand. John Sutherland got 25 years, died in prison after 8. Sheriff Henry Cole turned state's evidence, testified against the others, got 10 years, served 6. Justice, imperfect, incomplete. But more than Cole had dared hope for when this started, Frank would have been satisfied. 1 week after the verdict, a woman brought a child to Cole's ranch. The woman was Mexican, middle-aged, with kind eyes. The child beside her was small, for 9 years old. Dark hair in braids, dark skin, but eyes the color of winter sky. Silas Crow's eyes. Senor Brennan, I am Elena. I cared for little Sparrow while her father lived. The woman's voice trembled. I cannot keep her. I am going to Mexico, and she needs to know what her father was, so she can choose to be different. Little Sparrow looked at Nashotah. You knew my papa. Yes. They say he did bad things. He did. But he read to me every night, and he said he was sorry, that he wished he could take everything back. Nashotah knelt slowly. Your papa did terrible things. He hurt many people, killed my sister. But that doesn't mean you're terrible. You're not your father's sins. Will you hate me? Nashotah reached out, touched the girl's face. No, I won't hate you. Little Sparrow wrapped her arms around Nashotah's neck and sobbed. Nashotah's arms came up slowly. She held the girl, held Silas Crow's daughter, held the living reminder of everything she'd lost, and everything that could still be saved. After they left, Cole found Nashotah staring after them. That took strength, he said. Or mercy. I'm still learning the difference. She turned. My sister would have liked her. Kaya always saw the good in people. 6 months later, spring 1878. Cole stood on the porch of his rebuilt ranch house, watching the sun paint the mountains gold. His legs still hurt, probably always would, but he could walk without a cane now, could ride a horse, could do the work that needed doing. The valley stretched out before him, green with spring grass. His cattle grazed peacefully. The fence line he and Flint had rebuilt stood straight and true. Everything looked normal, peaceful. Except for the riders coming up the trail. Nashotah led them. Behind her, 7 Apache families, men, women, children. The witnesses and their relatives come to settle on the land the federal government had granted them as compensation. 2,000 acres adjacent to Cole's ranch, enough to build a community, to start over. She reined in at the porch, looked down at Cole with those dark, unreadable eyes. Behind her, the 7 families, men, women, children, and one more rider, a young man maybe 22 with Nashotah's eyes and her warrior's bearing. "We're home," Nashotah said. Then, turning to the young man, "Cole Brennan, this is my brother, Dakota. He survived Canyon de Chelly, spent 6 years searching for me." The young man dismounted, extended his hand. "She told me what you did, what you risked. I am in your debt." Cole shook his hand. "No debt. We just did what was right. That is debt enough." Dakota looked at the valley, at the land, at the future spreading before them. "Our father would have been proud. Of both of you." Cole smiled. "Welcome home." Welcome. Over the next weeks, a village rose in the valley. Not lodges, cabins, built in the Apache way, but using materials from the new world they had to navigate. A blending of cultures, a bridge between old and new. Nashotah took charge of building a school, teaching the children to read and write English while also keeping the Apache language alive. Teaching them their history, making sure they never forgot where they came from or what had been done to them, but also teaching them that justice was possible, that standing up mattered, that one person could make a difference if they refused to stay silent. Cole helped where he could, donated lumber, lent tools, worked alongside Apache men to raise walls and dig wells, not because he was trying to assuage his guilt, that would never go away, but because it was the right thing to do. Flint had stayed on as deputy marshal for Prescott, cleaned up the town, ran out the last of Crow's associates, built something that looked like honest law enforcement for the first time in years. Maria rebuilt her saloon, made it the finest establishment in Prescott, used the profits to fund a school for girls, Apache and white, learning together. Revolutionary for the time. But Maria had never been one to care about convention. Doc Hollis wrote a book about the conspiracy, about Frank Cassidy's investigation and the battle at Granite Creek Canyon. It became a bestseller, made him famous. He used the money to fund free medical care for Apache communities across the territory. And Cole raised cattle, mended fences, lived quietly. But once a month he rode to Prescott, visited Frank's grave in the cemetery on the hill, sat there for an hour talking to his old friend, telling him about the ranch, about Nashotah's school, about the Apache families building new lives in the valley, about how his promise had been kept. It was on one of these visits, 6 months after the trial, that he found Nashotah waiting at the grave. "I come here too," she said, "to thank him. He didn't have to help us, could have looked away like so many others, but he chose to stand up. He was a good man. So are you." Cole shook his head. "I stood by once, at Canyon de Chelly, did nothing while people died, and then you spent the rest of your life making it right. That counts for something." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Nashotah spoke again. "There's trouble in Wickenburg, a mining company trying to force Apache families off their land, using threats, violence. The local sheriff won't help." Cole felt something stir in his chest. The old instinct. The marshal's need to make things right. "They have lawyers?" he asked. "Lawyers won't help when the law's bought. They need someone who'll stand between them and the guns, someone who's done it before." "I'm retired." "I know." Nashotah's smile was slight, knowing. "Flint said you'd say that, said to tell you we're going anyway, thought you should know." She started to walk away. Cole looked at Frank's grave, At the simple headstone that read, Deputy U.S. Marshal Frank Cassidy, 1829 to 1877, he kept his promises. "Wait," Cole called. "I'll need to pack some things, get my rifles cleaned, be ready to ride in an hour." Nashota turned back. For the first time since he'd known her, she smiled. Really smiled. The kind of smile that reached her eyes and transformed her face. "I'll wait," she said. They rode out together at sunset, two people who'd been broken by violence and remade by justice, who'd learned that the fight never really ended, that there would always be powerful men trying to take what wasn't theirs, always people who needed someone to stand between them and the guns. But they'd also learned that standing up mattered, that one person could make a difference, that promises kept and debts paid meant something in a world that too often valued neither. Behind them, the sun sank toward the mountains. Ahead, Wickenburg waited. More trouble, more injustice, more opportunities to do what was right, even when it was hard. Cole Brennan felt his wounded leg throbbing with each step his horse took, felt the weight of his guns at his hip, felt the ghost of Frank Cassidy riding beside him, approving. He'd been trying to leave the violence behind for 3 years, had bought a ranch and built fences and told himself he was done. But some men weren't meant for peace. Some men were meant to stand in the gap, to be the wall between the helpless and those who would hurt them. Frank had known that. Had known it and called Cole back to the fight one last time. Except it hadn't been the last time. It never would be. Because the fight for justice didn't end. It just changed forms, moved locations, found new champions. And as long as there were people like Nashota who refused to stay silent, and people like Flint who chose to atone, and people like Cole who couldn't walk away from a promise that fight would continue. The stars came out one by one. The desert cooled. And two riders moved through the gathering darkness toward whatever came next. Together. Not because they had to, but because they chose to. And in the end, that choice made all the difference. The end.